Hey guys, welcome in. It is Brad with College SportsCast. We're here to do our 2024 SEC football season preview. All right, guys, that was our new little intro that I got for us. So we're here to dive right into our SEC season preview. These are long, 16 teams long. We try to go through and talk about each team just a little bit. So these are kind of long. I do have Hammonds here with me.
If
you guys
if
are
I
with
was
us
not,
on Facebook.
If I was not with you, it might be 3 or 4 hours.
If you guys are on Facebook with us tonight, you can help support us by sending stars, or you can subscribe to our Facebook channel now, Facebook page. It's only 99 cents a month, so we would appreciate if you guys will do either one of those. 99 cents a month. All right. There is a huge, huge difference in the SEC this year, John. And we are going to start with that team. That's who we're going to start with. We are starting with Alabama. And there is a huge, huge difference in the SEC this year. There is no Nick Saban at Alabama.
Not at all.
So we got to start with that. So Kellen DeBoer, let's talk about him for just a second before we dive into. So the one thing we know about Kellen DeBoer, he knows offense. So he took over Fresno State in 2020. He was 5th in the nation in passing. All right. In 2021, he was 9th in the nation at Fresno State. Then he went to Washington. In the last 2 years, he's only been number 1 and number 2. So Jalen Milroe's got a guy that knows passing. Now, I ask you, John, does Alabama have the parts?
I think they do, especially offensively. You know, they got Jalen Milroe. I know their offensive line has, not been the best the last couple years, but they do have pieces, and they bring back 3 of the main key cogs in that offensive line. Now, Justice Haynes is going to be their star running back. To me, it's going to be all on Jalen Milroe, I think, to make this offense go and make it do what it needs to do.
It all starts with Jalen Milroe. And to be honest with you, I think it's going to end with Jalen Milroe on the offensive side of the ball. Now, one big difference here in this Alabama team and some of the teams that he has coached, that DeBoer has coached, like at Washington. So, there's no O'Dunez, there's no Polk, there's no McMillan. He had 3 top 37 draft picks off, wide receivers on that Washington team. Do you see somebody in the Alabama side here, that's a receiver that can step in and fill some of those roles that O'Dunez, Polk, McMillan was filling the last 2 years?
Well, I mean, they got Kendrick Law. They got Jeremy Bernard, the transfer from Washington, Kobe Prentice. They're talented, but some of them are inexperienced. They did get some more transfers on the defensive side of the ball, but we'll get to that soon. But they're not – the cupboard is not dry. Jalen Milroe is who he is. He's going to use his legs. He's going to use his arm, and his arm even improved last year. Last year, early on in the year, he just wasn't Jalen Milroe. You look at the USF game against South Florida, they looked out of tune early in the year, and the more as the season went on, they started to play better. So it's not like this Alabama team is without talent. It's there. It's just how is Kalen DeBoer going to translate this from the Pac-12 to the SEC? Because the SEC to me is a different animal than the Pac-12. You're jumping into super heavyweights, and I'm interested to see how they do the first couple of games and see how that rolls.
All I'm saying is one thing for sure that we know about Kellen DeBoer is that he runs high octane offenses, and Jalen Milroe is going to have those opportunities. I just look at this roster, and yes, I'm not saying it's Alabama. They have talent, but I'm not sure that they have the O'Dunyas and the Polk and the McMillan type talent 3 deep like Washington's had the last 2 years is all I'm saying.
And I think too, everybody thinks that their running game is just going to be absent. I know that the running game needs to be better, but Kalen DeBoer brings
that's going to start up front, John, with a running game.
It does, and the up front is not being Alabama standards the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. The offensive line, they lose Wolford. He's at Kentucky, back at Kentucky. I think he, is a bonus for Kentucky, and I think he done a decent job at Alabama. He's a good recruiter, but we'll see how this translates at the offensive line because they do need to run the ball as well. So, but with that said, we're going to move to the defensive side of the ball here with Bama. And the one thing about Alabama on defense is they're going to have some linebackers.
They are.
I mean, they always do. The Dallas Turners,
Yeah.
They're going to have those backers. They've got a combo defensive coordinator here. Do you think that'll be an issue?
I don't think it will. He's changing his whole staff. Like you said, he's bringing in former South Alabama head coach Kane Womack to call the defense. It's just going to be a new era in Alabama, and it might not be Alabama of Alabama the first season under DeBoer. They're putting a lot of expectations on this coach right off the bat, and I think that's unfair to him. I know that Saban is one of the top coaches in the country. He might be the greatest of all time, but that's unfair to put a lot of this pressure on this coach. I know Alabama comes with expectations, and I know Alabama likes to win, and they have 8 or 9, 10 wins playoff every year, but it's just not fair to me to put that much expectations on this coach because I get these.
Before I move off of defense here, we move on to the keys of the season and stuff. I do want to mention how big is the loss of Caleb Downs?
It's huge
in that backfield.
I think it's really huge because the secondary a year ago wasn't the best, but he kind of made that defense run really good. And losing him is a key cog to that secondary. And, I know they added Keon Sabb. They added some guys in the portal and whatnot. But Alabama's going to have to improve. Now, offensive side of the ball, they're going to be fine. This is where I think they're going to have some issues, because their defense last year was atrocious at times. Just giving up a lot of big plays, a lot of chunk.
And the loss of Caleb Downs is huge. I mean, that dude was a go-getter from the time he first stepped on a field as a true freshman. I mean,
and get this, he went to Ohio State. He went to Ohio State.
No, we'll get him in a couple of weeks at Ohio State, but losing him hurts on that defensive, especially in that defensive secondary. They also lost Christian Story. We'll get him maybe a little bit later out of that defensive back secondary. So, but so keys to the season here. We had somebody mention in the comments the running game. I think being able to get that running game going so they can pass the ball like DeBoer and Milroe want, I think is going to be a key.
I think it is. They're not going to be void of talent. That's for sure. And, DeBoer's ability, he knows how to create offense, especially with Jalen Milroe going to be there. It's just going to be a different kind of Alabama season. And we'll get into their schedule. But I see maybe 3 losses, maybe 4 on the schedule, because you got games at Wisconsin, at LSU, at Oklahoma, and then you play Georgia at home, which a home game that's about even with Alabama, Georgia.
They expect to win. I mean, I don't care who's
in Tuscaloosa, but there's at least 3 losses on this schedule.
Yep.
If you
go
from
key players, who do you have as a key player? I've got Domani Jackson, cornerback. I think, losing Caleb Downs, I think this guy has got to figure it out and step up.
He does. To me, I feel like it's the run game. It's the stable of backs that they got. They're going to have to figure out the run game, because they're going to do the pass with Kalen DeBoer, what he did at Washington. It's going to be a new style for Alabama. But I feel like the run game is going to have to get better. But that all, like you said, that all starts with up front and the offensive line, and them being able to get off the ball and do better than they have in the last couple of years. But for me, it's the running backs. I think they have to have a established running game to get the passing going, because if you give Milroe some time, he's going to make plays with his feet. I mean, look at last year, beat Auburn on the last second play. Like he just does things that is just not human, and he just makes plays and just does things
with his arm.
That's what I'm saying. Like and that's not even with his legs. Like he's just good. He's just an overall talented player. And
all right, key game. Who do you think is the key game? I know you kind of mentioned the Wisconsin game already. I mean, for me, and I'll just say this right off the top, I know there's other games on their schedule that should mean a lot, but I think going to Neyland Stadium at Tennessee in a team that they have beaten 15 or 16 times in the last 17 years and had that massive lead and control over them, now that Saban's gone, I feel like that this Tennessee game on the road is going to be a huge tale for the future of not only the Bama, but maybe also at Tennessee as well.
I said Wisconsin, but I think I'm going to change that up. I think it has to be Georgia. And I say this because, it's a brand new year. Kalen DeBoer's coming in. It's a new season. How do you respond that first year against Georgia with a new coach and going into SEC play? I think that's going to be huge for them. Now, is it a winnable game? Yes. Is it a losable game? Yes, because Georgia's going to be right up there with the best of them. But I feel like if you want to get this team, this, monkey off your back, that this coach is not going to do this and this and that, I think you gotta at least win the Georgia game. You gotta go into SEC play and think, we got to take care of business at home, because
Oklahoma game is going to be a big game nationally. Oklahoma versus Alabama. I mean, that's going to be a big game nationally.
Well, that's what I said.
I just think that Tennessee within the SEC is going to be a key point inside the SEC. So to look at their schedule, they start out at home against Western Kentucky University. Then they play USF, South Florida, at Wisconsin, which is the third game of the season that you were talking about. Open date, Georgia at home, at Vandy, South Carolina at home, at Tennessee, October 19th, Missouri at home, which will be another big game, open date at LSU, Mercer at home, at Oklahoma, and then they get Auburn at home to finish off the year.
And Auburn's going to be much improved.
They are. I will agree with that 100%. I mean, not having Texas, not having Ole Miss, there are some teams that Bama is missing here. So, I mean, you look at the schedule at Tennessee, at LSU, at Oklahoma. It's still not easy.
If you think about it, the first part of the early schedule is pretty good. It's that middle to end that's kind of worrisome for me, because
all right, John, Alabama, I got their win total set at 9. What is your record prediction going to be for this Bama team? I think 10-2 is probably going to be in the 12-team playoff. 9-3 is questionable. So
it is.
I said it at 9. Where do you think this Alabama team ends up at the end of the regular season?
I think 10's doable, but man, it's just the end of that schedule. Just now they do got a couple of those home games, which will help. I say give me the 9. I don't know. I don't want to put many expectations on what Kalen DeBoer is going to try to do, because that's unfair to him, especially coming in with a Hall of Fame.
In this first year, if he can go 9-3 or 10-2, I think Alabama fans should be pretty happy. They probably won't,
no,
but they should be. That's what I'm going to say.
Unfortunately, they won't be. That's just how the ball crumbles. Because wasn't that a couple of years ago?
Saban I didn't say they would be. I said should be, John.
Now, there was a couple of years ago, Saban lost a game, and they was ready to get rid of him. Like, come on now. You're at Alabama, and you're ready to get rid of Saban? Like, come on.
All right, we're going to go on to Arkansas and Sam Pittman here. So, I'll start off with you. Do you think that Pittman makes it through the season? Let's put it that way.
Ooh, that's a really, really good question. Since they was 9-4 in 20. It was 9-4 in 21, right?
Yep.
Since that time, they have been like declining big time.
Yep.
And I feel like this season depends on the new OC, Bobby Petrino. I think if the offense can get back to where they need to be, I think they got a chance to be really good. I mean, they got Taylor Green, the quarterback transfer from Boise State. I think he's going to be really good.
He's going to be an absolute monster key for this team, I think, is Taylor Green. Now, I will say this. They got to get back to smash mouth running the ball that Sam Pittman was known for. That's what they did to get to that 9-4 season. And they beat some teams that were expected to be better, but wasn't. Texas was one that year.
Yeah, Texas was one of them, yeah.
Yeah. So, I think running the ball, and then Taylor Green has absolutely got to be on for them. And Bobby Petrino's got to come in and do what he does. And I really don't feel like he did spectacular last year at A&M. I mean, I'm not saying he done terrible, but I don't think he was spectacular. But it was first year.
Well, the thing about Arkansas that most people don't realize is there was just so many turnovers, fumbles, not enough, downfield power. They had special teams problems, not enough plays. They wasn't able to overcome none of this because their old offensive line just made a mess. They wasn't far off though, because 5 of those losses were by a touchdown or less. Like I remember the Alabama game, they was behind, I think 24-10 or something, 21-0, maybe 21-3, and they come back to only lose by 3. Like it wasn't like they was getting blown out. They was just making too many errors and too many mistakes. And it's fixable. I will say that it's fixable, but can Bobby Petrino do it in 1 year and figure it out and, get this offense together? Because
I think for Pittman's sake, he's going to need to. I mean, that's what I think. Defense. Let's talk about Arkansas's defense. 6 of the last 10 games, they gave up 34 more points.
Yeah,
I mean, you're not going to beat too many teams giving up 34 more points.
Well, and they lost their top 2 tacklers, Chris Paul and Jaheim Thomas. Now they did get Xavier Sorey from Georgia, the transfer. But their main guy that's going to lead this defense has to be up front with Landon Jackson. He's the main cog in this defense, and he's going to have to be the one to pull it together, because Arkansas cannot have the year they did a year ago and expect the offense to come through and not give the defense any time either. Like it was a total failure on both sides of the ball. And, we could sit here and talk about Arkansas all day long, defense, offense, special teams, kicking game, whatever. I just think that it's just going to – Pittman's just going to have to reach deep down inside of him and say, you know what? We're going to have to figure this out or I'm out of here. And that's basically what it boils down to.
So my absolute key to the season, fam, is they've got to get their identity back in rushing the football. And losing Rocket Sanders doesn't help.
No, it does not.
I mean, they lose. Not only do they lose him to a conference rival in South Carolina. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't help their running game, and they absolutely have to get back to pounding on the ground and pound. And when Arkansas is at its best, they have backs that can reel off 6-7 yards per carry.
I mean, you look from the past, Darren McFadden, Peyton Hillis, those guys, what they did, that's Arkansas football.
Yep.
And that needs, like you said, that needs to be brought back into their identity, into their standard that we're just going to run you over and just take control of the game. And you've just not seen that under Pittman. And Pittman's known for having a great offensive line. Like he's a great offensive line coach, but it's just not been standard Arkansas football. And I think a lot of that's
and they absolutely have to get back to it. Having said all of that, I still think their key player is Taylon Green, quarterback.
Has to be. That's who I said. It's, he might be a difference maker in the run game with his feet.
Yep. All right, key game, John. When you look at their schedule, where do you have as a key game? I'll tell you mine right off the bat. I have mine as at Auburn, September 21st.
I think that's the one, but there's 2. I said Oklahoma State, but I think I'm going to change to Auburn. You got to start winning the SEC again.
Yep.
And that starts this year, because if you don't, Pittman, you're going.
You got to find a couple of wins in the SEC, Pittman. I know that the SEC is tough, and I know you're trying to climb out, but you've got to beat Oklahoma State and find a couple of wins to get to your 6.
Well, see, the Oklahoma State game is a non-con game, and you can afford to lose that game. I mean, you beat Arkansas Pine Bluff. That's one thing. You can lose the non-con. You be 1-1, but their struggles have been in the SEC department, and they have to at least. I'm not saying get out here and win go 6-2 in the SEC, go 5-1, but win a couple games in the SEC. Get the fan base back on your back, because if you don't, like I said, Pittman's probably gone.
Yep. So let's take a look at their schedule. They start off August 31st with Arkansas Pine Bluff. Then they go at Oklahoma State. They're home against UAB, at Auburn, in Arlington, Texas A&M, and then home with Tennessee, open date, LSU at home, Mississippi State, Ole Miss at home, open date, Texas at home, Louisiana Tech at home, and then they end at Missouri. So that's a quick look at their schedule. They miss Alabama and Georgia and Oklahoma,
but
so,
I will say their schedule is still pretty tough.
It is. It is. I agree with that. But just looking at their schedule real quick, I have their win total set at 6. Are they over or under? And where do you think they wind up?
I would agree with you, but I just have not seen any improvement. Now, does that mean to say that it's going to get any better this year? It can. But there's just been no changes. There's been no desire the last couple of years. And until you see it on the field, I just don't see them going to a bowl game.
I said it at 6, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I think 5 and 7 is likely, and if they do, I don't think Pittman will make it out of December. I'm not sure if he makes it to the end or not, but I don't think he'll make it out of December as the head coach.
I think they're going to have to win games. Well, I would say not win games. They're going to have to win some games that they're not exactly supposed to win. And that starts with Auburn and a couple of those games that are coming up in the early part of the schedule.
Yep. Oklahoma State's going to be a big one for them as well.
I agree with you.
That definitely is going to be a big one for them as well. All right. We are going to move on to the Auburn Tigers.
Oh, my favorite. This is my favorite interview. This is my favorite discussion right here, because this is my team as a sleeper.
Okay, so we're moving on to the Auburn Tigers here in 2024. This is Hugh Freeze's second year. He did make a bowl game with them last year at 6-6 and lost. So they went 6-7. They are kind of being picked as a sleeper, 8-4, 9-3 team here. But here's what I want to say. Looking at the way he's recruiting, again, just like he did at Ole Miss, you better get him now. You better get him this season if you're going to.
You ought to.
That's all I'm going to say. And Kentucky's on the schedule. So if you're going to beat them, you better get them this year.
Well, and last year their offense at times it played fast, but it was just, I wouldn't say it was horrible. There was just not a lot to be desired. Now, I will say this. Auburn brings in a brand new receiving corps, and they might have, next to Ole Miss and maybe Texas, they might have one of the best skill positions, like on the offensive side of the ball.
Biggest question here on offense is Peyton Thorne.
That's the key.
And why Hugh Freeze didn't go after a transfer quarterback, and that's been the biggest talk here with Auburn all off season long, even as far back as spring ball. So that's the biggest sticking point here for Auburn. Can Peyton Thorne run the offense that Hugh Freeze wants to? I mean, Auburn was close last year, and then they ended the season with a terrible loss to New Mexico State at home. And then they had the Jalen Milroe miracle and then lost a bowl game. So that's how they ended the season.
They just collapsed down the stretch.
Yeah.
Name to watch for me offensively is Cam Coleman. If you don't know him now, you're going to figure him out pretty quick. 5-star talent, really great player. Robert Lewis, the transfer from Georgia State. I think it's Georgia State, maybe Georgia Southern something.
It is. It's Georgia State.
Georgia State. They got the Lambert Smith from Penn State. Hunter's back on the offensive side. They got Fairweather from Florida International, the tight end. This might be Auburn's best offense that they've had in 3 or 4 years, skill position wise.
Oh, I agree with you 100%.
But the key question, like you said, is can Peyton Thorne prove the doubters wrong and figure it out and get it to these guys? That's the big question mark.
All right. On defense, he brings back in DJ Durkin. It's his guy. Been with him before. And Durkin's been a good defensive coordinator. Now, he was a former head coach at Maryland. He's been at Texas A&M as defensive coordinator. And he brings back DJ Durkin as the coordinator here. Is that, he's also brought in a couple of other guys that were his guys. Last year, he didn't have all of his guys with him. And I think that's going to make a difference here for Auburn this year as well.
I do. This group, to me, needs to get more pressure up front. And another thing, they got to be better against the run. It was really bad last year. But here's the thing that got me is they wasn't great against the run, but they was great on third downs. They have
a young group of linebackers.
Eugene Asante.
I think they're going to need a little growing up throughout the season, which doesn't always bode well. But when you look at their schedule, and we'll do that in a minute, they could start out 4-0. I mean, it's possible. So that does bode well for growing up a little bit, like I was just talking about. They need some new corners to shine on this defense. I think offensively they have a lot of weapons. Defensively, I think there's some youngness here that they're going to have to, kind of rise up and overcome.
I do. I just, they brought back Eugene Asante. To me, he's one of the best linebackers in the country, and even in the SEC. My key player, since we're at that, I think it's Trill Carter. They need the tackles to be they need them to step up, and it begins with them up front.
That's actually who I have. That's who I have.
I didn't even know. So
yeah, I know.
I guess
that's actually who I have is Trill Carter.
I think it's huge because you lose Justin Rogers, you lost some guys on the line. You're going to need these guys to step up and create some pressure.
Keys to the season for me is they are 2-5 when they gave up 200 or more passing yards. And I talked about those young cornerbacks and stuff and young linebackers. I think defensively this team's got some growing up to do, and I think that's going to be important. for them to have the kind of season that they are hoping for, because a lot of fans are hoping for an 8-4, 9-3 season here. In for Auburn here at Jordan-Hare this year. So, all right, key game. When you look at their schedule, who do you think is their key game? I'll tell you mine right off the bat. I have at home against Oklahoma.
What's up, Bill?
And
Oklahoma.
the reason why I say that is I think it's possible that Auburn could be 4-0 going into that game. It's at Jordan-Hare, and they get Oklahoma Sooners coming to Jordan-Hare. I mean, I think this could be a huge, huge game, and if they could get this win, signature win with Hugh Freeze right off the bat, I think that could be huge for them this season.
I think it could be. The Oklahoma game's really huge, I think, because you come into that game 4-0, and there's an opportunity there for the fans to get behind them and really see Auburn as maybe as a team to watch in the SEC. And I think, that game starts it. And I think that game is huge for not only winning, but I think it's huge for recruiting as well.
All right, so let's take a dive and look at their schedule real quick. They start off with Alabama A&M and Cal at home, New Mexico at home, Arkansas at home. So they get the Oklahoma game at home. They start off with 5 straight home games. Then they go at Georgia, open date, at Missouri, at Kentucky, Vandy at home, open date, Louisiana Monroe, Texas A&M at home, and at Alabama is how they end the season.
I got the over and under at 8. I think the Oklahoma game.
I think they're at 7.5 or 8 for their over and under.
I think the Oklahoma game is the key game.
It absolutely is. I mean,
because either you win that game, you either win that game or you lose that game, and it's flip flop. Your season either gets better or you kind of have a little streak there where you kind of flop out.
Yeah, man, I agree with you. I think this Auburn team could easily be an 8-4 team, and that's kind of where I have them is being an 8-4 team this year. And if they can do that, I think that'll be a huge step in the right direction for this Auburn team. All right, we're going to move on to the Florida Gators. I mean, the first thing we're going to talk about, John, with Florida is Billy Napier.
Billy Bob.
I mean, it's Billy Napier. I mean, you know what? Here's another one. Do you think he makes it through the season? They have a very tough schedule.
That's a good question.
And we will get to that. But
that's a really good question. Now, I will say this. A lot of people didn't think that Graham Mertz would have the kind of season that he did a year ago, but he wasn't the problem. Let's put it out there.
No, but I mean, they lost Princely, they lost Farmer, they lost NTM. I mean, they lost quite a bit in the transfer portal as well. This Florida team,
and
which is strange, thinking that these top talents are leaving Florida to go somewhere else. But it's true. I mean, they actually did. So, looking at their offensive line has got to improve. Excuse me.
Injuries happen. Injuries happen. but
They had
they've
a
been a
great
huge.
running game, but now Johnson is hurt, so I'm not sure. Maybe you know more information. Is he out for the year, or is he coming back?
I haven't really heard. I do know that they got Treon Webb. He was, I think, the third leading rusher from a year ago. And they got Jaden Ball. He should be in the rotation. So it's not like but they do lose a lot in Montreal Johnson. He led the Gators last year. I think he had 5 touchdowns last year. Graham Mertz wasn't, dynamic, but he was serviceable. He made plays even when the offensive line was terrible. There was a couple of games where he looked really bad, but he'll spread the ball around. He just needs more time, like you said, from that offensive line. And I think they're going to have some help. They got Eugene Wilson. They got the Dyke kid, Shamir Dyke from Wisconsin. They got Elijah Badger from Arizona State. They're going to be fine offensively. I just think they're just going to have to get this offensive line straight and get it figured out, because if they don't get it figured out, it's going to be the same problems that they had a year ago. And if that happens, then Billy Napier's probably gone.
Let's talk about their defense, John. They have to be far stronger than they were last year.
I remember a time when Florida defense, when you talked about them, like on these preseason shows and picks, that was their main strength of their football team. Their run defense a year ago was not good at all.
Well, that's my key to their season is run defense. Since you brought it up, that's my key to the season.
I feel like the secondary needs to be better too. There was a lot of.
I feel like their linebackers and the secondary is probably a little better. Here's my deal with Florida. I think their 22 is still as talented as they've always been. I think it's their backups. They don't have quite as much talent after 22.
But there's a lot of they do have some depth this year that they didn't have a year ago. And for me, my key player is Jason Marshall. He might be their best defensive player. Last year he broke up 18 passes. Well, actually in the last 2 years. So he's their main cog in their secondary. And I think he's going to be a big thing for them. But like I said, their main key for the year is their run defense. There was a time back in the day when the Florida run defense, you couldn't run on them.
Yep.
My
key player is actually a San Diego State transfer. And I think he's going to fill up one of the tackle spots on that offensive line, Brandon Dickinson Crenshaw. Yeah. I think he's going to be a key player for them. And it's really odd to sit here and tell you that a key player for the Florida Gators is a San Diego State Aztec transfer.
My other one would have to be Elijah Badger. I think, he comes in, I think he was averaging over 15 yards per catch a year ago for Arizona State. I think he'll kind of fill the role that Ricky Pearsall left, which is a big loss for Florida, honestly. But I think adding Dyke and Badger will be real big to get the ball to those playmakers. But it just all starts with the offensive line. If you don't have an offensive line, you're not going to win many games in the SEC in college football, and especially the SEC, you're just not going to win.
All right, key game, John. I'm calling it right off the bat. Game 1 at home against Miami. I know it's a non-conference game, but when you look at their schedule, like Billy Napier, the way they lost, I think they lost like 5 in a row at the end of the year last year. Billy Napier needs this home win at Ben Griffin Stadium.
I agree. I think it's Miami. I don't think beating them is going to just be like, the Gators are back. But, man, would that feel good to win that home game early in the year? There's a
I
lot.
think it will give them a little bounce for the season if they can win that game. So I'm calling that their key game. Looking at their schedule, they start off with Miami, Samford at home, Texas A&M at home. So they get 3 home games. At Mississippi State, winnable game.
Mm-hmm.
Open date. Then they play at home against UCF.
Which is another tough game.
At Tennessee, Kentucky at home.
Which they lost two
then
years
the
in a row.
Georgia game in Jacksonville.
3 years.
You get the Georgia game in Jacksonville, at Texas, LSU at home, Ole Miss at home, and at Florida State is how they end the year. That schedule, they play 11 power conference schools, guys.
The thing about the schedule is they got to win the Miami game. Because if you win the Miami game, you're pretty much solid to beat.
You can win the Miami game and beat Samford at home and then go to Mississippi State and get a win. Even if you lose to Texas A&M,
you're 3-1
home. You're 3-1 in the first 4 games, and you've got some breathing room after that. Then you got an open date, and then play UCF at Tennessee and Kentucky. So
I think, to me, the over and under. I hate to do it, Florida fans, but I'm going to.
I got 5.5.
I got 6. I think there's going to be somewhere in there they're going to win a game they're not supposed to. And it could be Kentucky, it could be Miami, it could be Tennessee, since Tennessee has not been able to beat them in that series. It's been tough. Florida kind of owns that series. So I think it starts with Miami. I think they got to win that game.
That start is going to be key. So, like I said, for Florida there, I think that, getting out early and having a 3-1, start is going to be key. And the only way to do that is they have to win at home against Miami, in my opinion.
Yep. That is the key game.
All right. Then we're going to get to Georgia, guys. The Georgia Bulldogs. 42-2 the last 3 years.
It's impressive.
Wait a second. I don't think y'all heard me. They are 42-2 the last 3 years. Wow. That's all I have to say. And the 2 losses were to Saban and Alabama. They've lost to nobody else. So there is no coach, no team that has beat them, or no coach that has beat them currently coaching in the last 3 years.
You want to know an impressive stat to me? Since we're going out talking offense, they ended the season 5th in the country in total and scoring offense, right? They was 5th in passing efficiency. They was number 1 in the nation in third down conversions. Number 2, but I think they was number 2 behind Oregon in first downs. And they was first in the SEC and 9th in time of possession. Now
I agree with you a little bit, Bill, on that.
Was they perfect last year? No. There was games where they didn't look that great. Auburn was one. The Alabama game was one. Missouri was another. When I look at this group offensively this year, I think it's going to be more effective. I think they'll put more games away this year because of the offense. Even though they outscored teams a year ago, pretty
Here's
high.
my question about the offense, John. They lost Ladd McConkey. They lost Bowers. I mean, I know they went out and got the Vanderbilt transfer. And, wide receiver, and he's got talent. I'm not going to say he doesn't, but Bowers and McConkey, they're first rounders or high second rounders.
Oh, I totally agree with you. But I think too, you're not. See, here's the thing: you're not going to replace Bowers, But there's a name that everybody needs to know, and his name's Oscar Delp. He will be there. Dominic Lovett will be there. They got Dylan Bell back, which they ended up losing Rara Thomas because of some issues going on that he got kicked off the team. I think was it a week or so ago. Kobe Young, the Miami transfer, is going to be great for them. So they're going to be a really good offense. This offense, to me, might be better than they was a year ago. And for a lot of
that's going to start up front too, John. They have 4 what will probably be NFL starters back.
Yeah, like
on that offensive line.
4 starters, and the depth that they got is absolutely insane to me. The offensive line is going to be back. They're going to be just nasty up front. They got Ernest Green, Xavier Trust, Dylan Fairchild's back, Tate Rutledge is back, Jared Wilson. I think he's stepping in for Cedric Van
Pran is going to be the center.
So the depth is there. The offensive line is there. And that's scary for teams knowing that this offense might be better than it was a year ago.
And we ain't even brought up Trevor.
And we're not even talking about the defense yet.
I mean, Trevor Etienne, you can talk about offense here, and you got Beck. So maybe they don't need a Bowers. I don't know. Maybe they don't need a Lad McConkey. But I'm just telling you, I mean, if I was to be nitpicky, those 2 losses you would think would affect most teams. It would affect Georgia. I'm not sure that it will.
Not as much.
All right, let's get to the defense.
Michael Williams.
Absolutely. Kentucky was all over him, and I wanted him so bad. But when Georgia comes calling, it's hard to pull the kid. So, but he is defensive lineman up front, man. I mean, he's a monster up front. That's where the defense is going to start here. Mm-hmm. They're going to have, again, even though they lost Dumas Johnson to Kentucky, mm-hmm. they're going to have one of the best linebacker crews in the conference.
That's not even talking about the front 4. Nazir Stackhouse,
nasty.
Nazir Stackhouse. They got Warren Brinson, and their rotation is so deep. Like now, it's pretty young, but it's deep. But the guys that they're going to switch in and out, and CJ Allen. That's not even talking about CJ Allen and the linebacker crew.
Like the linebackers, I'm telling you, are loaded.
Jalen Walker, Chaz Chambliss, Small Mondon.
The only possible, and I mean smidget possible weakness on this defense is going to be the secondary. You might be able to find a space in the secondary that you could attempt to pick on. And I said attempt.
I think losing Nyland Green hurt him a little bit. He went to Purdue. I think that hurts him a little bit. Lassiter left. Now they did bring back Humphrey and Everett. Now they'll probably use the freshman Ellis Robinson a lot. He should be a really good coverage guy. Now Malachi Starks might be the best guy in this secondary safety. He might be the best safety in the country. Let's just not. That's not even counting the SEC. Like let's just let's just leave it at that. Like from their offense to their defense to their special teams, and let's not get started on Georgia's kicking game because their kicking game has always been good. Their kicking game is going to be as good this year. They got a great kicker.
All right, so my key to the season here for them is, and my one thing that I didn't think they did real well last year. I know they went undefeated and lost in the SEC championship game, but their pass rush wasn't spectacular.
It wasn't.
Defensively, they were awesome. I'm not going to say, but they didn't have quite the pass rush that they have been having. With
Auburn,
Carter.
Auburn gave him fit. Auburn gave him fits last year.
Yeah. So if I had to pick anything that I think they need to improve on, that would be it. Mm-hmm. Key player. Who do you have for a key player for Georgia?
I think it starts with Carson Beck. I know the offensive line is going to be back. They returned 4 starters, but I mean, the defense is going to do what they do. I think there's some real questions, back in the secondary a little bit. But I think if they want to have another big year, I think, I'm not saying he's the greatest quarterback, but he's just a game manager. He knows how to, he knows how to handle the pressure. And
it's possible he could be the number 1 pick in the draft, and he could definitely be a Heisman candidate because they're going to win a lot of games.
And I don't even think he's that great of a quarterback. I'm not saying he's great. What I'm saying, he's just a guy that just goes out there and gets things done.
I'm going to give you a name that nobody else is going to give you here. He's a wide receiver that transferred from Miami. Colby Young.
Colby Young. Yep.
Colby Young is his name. He is a senior wide receiver. Last 2 years at Miami, he has 79 catches, 930 yards, and 10 touchdowns. And when you're replacing Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, like I talked about here when we first started talking, I think a guy like him could be key in that passing game for Beck. I know you have Delp at the tight end and a few options there as well. But look for Colby Young to be a new name at Georgia that you hadn't heard of yet.
Michael Williams.
Well, I've heard of him.
I'm just saying. My key game is Texas. I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there. I think if you win that game, you're pretty much. Well, I wouldn't say destined to go to the SEC championship, but because you got to get through Alabama. But you mark off one of the top games that you need to do to get there, and I think that's really a big game in my opinion this early in the season.
I'm gonna put a road game a little bit later in the season here. I'm going at Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is going to be one of the top teams in the SEC this year. I think it's Lane Kiffin's turn here, and it should be. Let's see if he gets there. We'll get to them a little bit later. But this game in Oxford on November the 9th, and I know they play at Alabama as well. So, I mean, they've got some big games here.
Mm-hmm.
That you can pick from. All right. They start out neutral site Clemson, Texas Tech at home at Kentucky, open date at Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State at home at Texas, open date Florida and Jacksonville, at Ole Miss, Tennessee at home, UMass at home, and Georgia Tech at home is how they end the season.
I got to say 11. Like, if you're going to be a title contender and SEC championship contender, you got
Well, I have their over-under set at 10.5, but 11 is where I expect them to be.
That's where I got them. I mean, there might be a
Now,
slip
they've
up.
been undefeated the last couple of seasons in the regular season and everything. So, I mean, they haven't lost any regular season games. So if they drop one, it's a pretty big deal because they haven't been doing that.
And the thing about Georgia, though, that really concerns me, though, is in some of these games, they just last year they never put teams away, and that concerns me on certain games on this schedule because it gets a little tougher, and you know.
All right, John, we're getting to Kentucky.
This should be good.
So, all right, we're doing this in alphabetical order, guys, just in case you guys are wondering. We are at Kentucky. I mean, I'm going to start out with the polls come out yesterday, and they had Kentucky 37th in the coaches poll.
They did.
Does that seem even a little bit low to you? Because it does to me. But
I do. I think
I'm going to be honest with you, John, right off the bat. It's time that you have to start winning some against some of the good teams.
Yeah, you got to win games against the. I wouldn't say you got to beat Georgia
Even
every
500
year.
or above, but you've got to win games against the good teams.
You do.
So that's where I'm going to start out with Kentucky on offense. Again, John, a whole lot of new when it comes to the coaching. So we've got a new offensive coordinator. You got a new offensive line coach. You've got a new wide receiver coach. You've got a new quarterback.
Got a new running back.
You got a new running back again. So there's a whole lot of new here on the offensive side of the ball. Of course, you bring in former 5-star Georgia quarterback Brock Vandagriff. He's probably going to be the starter. Gavin Wimsatt might be a change of pace Wildcat guy that comes in from Rutgers. But weapons on the outside, there's a lot back. But there's also a whole lot of new here for Kentucky.
There is. You get the running back from Ohio State, DeMonte Traynham. I think he's going to be a workhorse type back. But last year for me, it was the line. They didn't do enough to get the running game going. Now, it was great in pass protection, and they were really good at keeping the negative plays to a minimum than they'd had the year before. But it's going to have to be better in the run game. They do bring back Eli Cox. I think he's one of the best centers. Marquise Cox is a tackle. Getting Gerald Mincey from Tennessee really was a big deal, I thought.
For that
especially at the tackle spot. But like you said, this might be one of the fastest offenses in college football, maybe even the SEC. Dane Key, Barian Brown. They got Jamori Macklin from
now if we can just play fast. Lord have
North Texas. Wasn't he from North Texas?
Yeah. Missouri and then North Texas.
He went to Missouri, then North Texas. So I think, you're going to get a different kind of style of offense. If you can get the RPO and the run game back to where Kentucky needs to have it, I think this could be a really fun team to watch.
So offense, they got a lot of weapons. I agree with you. The offensive line is going to be an absolute key here. They absolutely have to pick up the pace.
Yeah, it was slow.
The last 2 years has been pitiful. I mean, just pitiful to watch on the offensive side of the ball. They were lucky if they snapped the ball 52, 53 times a game last year.
That was really slow.
And a lot of these teams are snapping 70 to 80 a game. So they just don't get enough offensive plays. That is an absolute key for this offense. Now, defense. John, a lot of people are sleeping on this Kentucky defense.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They are.
I'm going to tell y'all right now, this Kentucky defense has all the pieces to be legit.
They do. Could be even better than the 2019 team.
I'm telling y'all right now, this Kentucky defense has all the pieces to be legit. Deion Walker, he could be the best defensive player in the nation.
That's not even counting Maxwell Harrison in the secondary. They bring back Jordan Lovett.
I know
that. Keyshawn Silver returns. Now they lost Josiah Hayes to an injury early this offseason, but they still got depth at the D-line positions. Like they might have 3 or 4 of the top 100 players in the country at linebacker, secondary, and D-line. Deion Walker.
All 3 levels.
Safari, De'Aaron Jackson. Then they got the Jamin Dumas-Johnson from Georgia.
Their linebackers are going to be J.J. Weaver, De'Aaron Jackson, and Jamin Dumas-Johnson from Georgia, who in 2022 was an All-American. Second-team All-American. So I'm just telling – and that was on a 2022 national championship Georgia team with 80-some tackles and was an All-American.
Well,
if you guys don't know, I'm telling you that this Kentucky defense, and before I leave, this Kentucky defense has got some 4-star freshmen that are going to come in on third down packages. Smith twins and Robinson. Y'all remember their name because they're coming after your ass. That's all I'm going to say.
Yep.
Just telling you.
The biggest transfer in, since we're going that direction, would be Jamin Dumas-Johnson. He played right away as a freshman at Georgia. He was banged up a lot last year, missed a lot of the seasons. I'm going to say this. Don't be shocked. Now, don't be shocked if he leads this team in tackles this year. Just be prepared.
Who's that? Dumas-Johnson?
Yeah.
Oh, no, Dumas-Johnson probably will. I think he probably will lead this team.
He'll probably lead them in tackles.
J.J. Weaver had 7.5 sacks last year. Look for him to continue that kind of stuff. Alex Afari is probably moving to linebacker here. I'm telling you guys, this defense is legit. Has all the pieces to be legit. I'm talking
it has. I've said it since
top 3 defense in the SEC.
I've said it since probably early May. This defense has a really good chance to be top 3 in the SEC. And that's not a –
Having said that, my keys to the season here is stopping the run.
They did a good job last year.
And they got to continue that. And now, they did at times, but against the top teams, they kind of struggled.
Mm-hmm.
Against the top teams.
Yeah.
Now, that's my keys for the season here. So key player, I know you probably already said yours with Dumas-Johnson. My key player is going to be Brock Vandagriff.
I think he's huge. That's another one. So
my key player here is going to be Brock Vandagriff. I think the defense is going to be legit. I really do. There's a whole lot of new on this offense, and they are going to need Vandagriff to lead this offense.
If they give Vandagriff time, if the offensive line can improve in pass protection, which they was good last year. It was the run run plays that they struggle with. But if they can stay upright and figure out how to keep their man not from falling on the ground, I think there's going to be a massive, massive change in this offensive identity. And my key game, man, I want to say Georgia, but it's not. It's South Carolina. And I say this to say this. Because you beat Southern Miss, you're 1-0, right? Well, you lose to South Carolina, you're 1-1, right? Well, then you're 1-1 going again to the game against Georgia. And there's where it could turn sideways.
Listen, the South Carolina game, as far as I'm concerned, it's an absolute win. And if you can't win that, then the season, you might as well just mark it up right there because
chalk the season up. Like you gotta
win. You have to win that game. I'm sorry, you have to win that game.
You have to. Like it's there, and you lose that game, and then you lose the Georgia game. You're 1-2, and now you're starting to think for yourself, and you're thinking, what do I have to do to get back in good graces? And
well, my key game here, it is a home game. And I think that Kentucky absolutely has to start winning against good teams, like I said to start with. And my key game is at home against Auburn.
Yeah, that's another one.
That's my key game. This Auburn team is going to be pretty good. We already covered them. I think they can have a very good chance of being an 8-4 team, being at least 4-4 in the SEC at the very least. And having said that, this is the year that you have to get Hugh Freeze if you're going to get him, and they come to your house.
Yeah.
So you have got to win, circle this game to take down the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah.
So with that said, I'm going to take a quick look at their schedule. Southern Miss and South Carolina and Georgia are all 3 home games to start the season out. 4, actually. Ohio is the 4th game. And then at Ole Miss, open date, Vandy at home. At Florida, which is another big game, being in the swamp. At home against Auburn. At Tennessee, open date, Murray State at home, at Texas, and Louisville at home.
Yeah. Which Louisville will be much improved this year too.
Yeah. That is what the schedule looks like. I have their over and under. I said it. I know that a lot of the bettings, FanDuel and everything have it at 6.5.
I got it at 7.
I got it at 7. That's what I got it.
I mean, you're going to have – see, the reason I say the South Carolina game, Brad, is because you lose that game, you're 1-2, and then you beat Ohio, you're 2-2. Or no, wait a minute. You lose to Georgia, you're 1-2. You beat Ohio, you're 2-2. And then you go to Ole Miss and lose, you're 2-3 in the middle of the schedule that could get really dicey. And
I agree with you. All the home games are dire. I mean, you have to win these home games outside of Georgia. I'm not going to blow everybody's mind here and tell everybody that Kentucky's beating Georgia. But outside of Georgia, they got to win these home games.
They do. I agree with you.
They're huge.
They're must-win games.
Yeah, so don't go be telling people that I blew everybody's mind
and said that it was going to beat Georgia.
Said something about beating Georgia at home, because that's not what I said. Not at all.
Not at all.
All right, LSU. Can LSU get to that 10th win, or are they stuck on 9 with Brian Kelly?
Man, I'm going to be honest with you. The defense is going to have to be better, especially on the back end. The secondary was really, really tough to watch. They're going to have to stop the run. Can they figure it out? They've gave up 2,000 yards rushing in each of the last
In
2 years.
back-to-back years. Yep. First time possibly ever. I know that I done a little looking and back through the 90s, and I never seen that before.
And this is a team that has been known for getting elite guys at the playmaking position, in the linebacker position and cornerback position. It's been atrocious, and until that improves, it's not going to get any better. Like, now, they do bring back Jacoby and Gorey, Jalen Lee, Savion Jones, and they got some guys in the transfer portal. But you're going to have to figure out how to stop the run. But
well, let's talk about the offense for just a minute.
But yeah, moving to the offense.
So Grant Nussmeier.
Yeah, he's an unknown to a lot of people.
Where
but probably
are you at with him? Because I have seen people say that he's going to be at the top of the list for the SEC, and I've seen people say that he's unproven. So,
well, I mean, he's probably unproven to other people, but he's probably not unproven to LSU because they know what they're getting with him. You know, he saw some time over the last 3 years, and I know they got.
I don't think they get 7,000. I don't think they get 7,000 yards on offense this year. I'm just saying.
I will say that they got a really good, decent receiving core. You know, they bring back Mason Taylor at the tight end position. I think Chris Hilton is back. They got the transfer out of Liberty, C.J. Daniels. You know, he's not going to be Jaden Daniels. He's just not. You know,
I say it. They're not going to have 7,000. Did y'all hear me? 7,000 offensive yards last year.
I think where their strong suit this year, to me, is up front. You know, this might be their biggest strength. You know, they got top he's probably going to go NFL. Will Campbell, he'll be off the board next year. Emory Jones is a top NFL prospect. You know, they have DJ Chester. I think he plays at center. Miles Frazier is at the guard spot. So they're going to be fine up front. And like I said, it's not going to be all about Jaden Daniels and what he did. It's a new year, new team. But they got enough weapons offensively to do some damage in the SEC. But like I said, it's just going to be about the defense. How does the defense manage to stop the run and figure things out? Because a year ago it was just really,
you can't give up 2,000 yards rushing.
You just can't. And especially not in SEC play, because teams are just not. They're going to blow you out every single night, and they made up for that last year with their offense.
I'm going to say this: despite them giving up 2,000 yards in back-to-back seasons, size up front on the defensive line is not an issue.
It's not. It's not. Which, I mean, they bring back Harold Perkins.
So what is the issue? Like, they're huge, they're big, they're fast. Is it just scheme? Was it Matt House? Because they brought in a new coordinator and got rid of Matt House.
It has to be, because there was times last year I was watching the LSU games, and Harold Perkins was just plumb out of position at times. Like, he just did not. I wouldn't say he didn't know where to go.
I mean, he was overplaying. He was all over the field, so he was overplaying stuff.
Yeah, and last year's pass defense was probably I think it was the second worst in the SEC. Now they do get Major Burns, Sage Ryan, Jordan Gilbert. He comes in from Texas A&M. I think he'll help out up there. Now, P.J. Woodland's a freshman. I expect him to be a big factor right away.
So here's my key to the season: stop the run.
Yeah, it has to be the main thing. Like, you gotta.
I mean, it's that simple. Stop the run. All right. So key player.
I think
do
it's
you have?
Musmire. I think it's
Nussmeier?
Musmire.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say that he's going to be
No
Jaden
pressure.
Daniels.
No pressure to be Jaden Daniels or nothing. I mean,
I'm not saying that he has to be great.
I'm just messing. Me.
But he has to be good.
You don't have to live up to the Heisman or nothing. I'm just saying.
No, like he does not have to be that. Like everybody's thinking like he has to come in and be great, but he has to be good if LSU wants to get to the college football playoff. Like he's got to be on. Is what I'm saying. He has to be on games. Like you can't have these.
So key game, John, and I'm going to give you a quick little stat here, and this is the reason why I have chosen this as the key game. My key game is in Las Vegas, September 1st against USC. It is the first game of the year, and yes, I am fully aware that they have a whole SEC slate to play. Here's why it is the key game for the year. Okay,
I know exactly why, because three of
the last two years they have opened the season with Florida State as a loss with Brian Kelly. Okay,
they lost to UCLA too.
The year before that, they opened the season with a loss to UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
The year before that, in 2020, they opened the season to Mississippi State in a loss.
Got cooked at home.
Yes. Okay. So I'm here to tell you guys that LSU has not won the opening game since 2019 when they had that killer team and won the title.
Joe Burrow.
Yep. So that's why I said their key game is they got to get off the snide here, to start the season out. And they're playing USC in Vegas.
Yep.
Now, I'm aware they have a whole slate of SEC games, and there's a lot of key games that you can pick and choose from there. But that's why I picked that game. All right. USC in Vegas, home against Nichols, at South Carolina, home against UCLA, South Alabama open date, Ole Miss at home, Arkansas away, Texas A&M away, open date, Alabama at Florida, Vandy, and Oklahoma at home is how they end their season this year.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think it's the early season game against USC.
I just looked at it and like, man, how have they lost that many, first games of the year in a row? I mean, come on now.
Now, I will say this while we're on this subject. They brought in former DC Blake Baker from Missouri. So I think that's going to help a little bit. Matt House was, I don't know what happened to Matt House.
They've been stuck at 9 wins. They need that one extra win to be 10-2 to get in the playoffs. To make sure, probably. I got it set at 9. I got their season set at 9.5.
I think it's 9.
So you think they're stuck on 9?
Yeah, I think they get 9.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. We're gonna call Brian Kelly the 9 guy. All right, Mississippi State. What you got on Mississippi State here? So with Mississippi State, they got Jeff Levy. The first thing that I want to talk about is that with Mississippi State, they went back to offense. If you go back to the Dan Mullen days, they were great in offense. Then they had Mike Leach. There was an offensive mind, and they went back with Jeff Levy as an offensive-minded guy. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of bode well for Mississippi State over the last 10 years. You know, you go back to Dan Mullen with Dak Prescott and stuff. And then, like I said, Lee with Rodgers.
They went from air raid to just running. I mean, they took away what strengths that Will Rogers had, and he wasn't even the same quarterback last year.
And Levy was the star offensive coordinator for that Oklahoma team, and Dylan Gabriel and all that they did. He also was with Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss before that. So, I mean,
I just think it's going to take time to instill a winning culture and establish success here.
Now, I do too. I mean, their offensive line, I think they lost everybody on the offensive line.
It's going to be a struggle this year.
The cupboard was bare. I'm just saying, in the long run, I think them going after an offensive-minded guy is where they have had some success over the last 10 or 12 years.
They have. I mean, you look at Mike Leach, what he did with them in the air raid offense. He changed that whole offense around, and they won some games and put up some numbers.
So defense. Zach Arnett has not been bad on the defensive side of the ball.
No, he's gone.
You know, so they defense is not going to be their Achilles heel, I don't think, here.
Mm-mm.
The linebackers should be pretty good.
The problem they're going to have, though, is like veteran leadership. You know, they don't have a lot of starters from a year ago.
No, they lost their coach, a lot of transfers.
Now, they do bring back Corey Ellington. I think he'll be their best return player. You know, they got the key.
I think the key is going to be adjustments on the offensive side of the ball.
I think it is.
How quick does Levy get some adjustments made throughout the season here that is working in a good direction and for Mississippi State to move the football?
It was impossible to watch a year ago, you know. They failed to get 200 yards passing 8 times. Like Will Rogers was not the same quarterback.
So key player has got to be Blake Shapen.
He's one of them, but I think mine will have to be Ethan Miner, the center. I think he'll rebuild a lot of this offensive line that Mississippi State needs. The guys that they lost, I think he'll be a big piece for them.
Baylor, Blake Shapen had 5,600 yards, 36 touchdowns in 3 seasons. He's got to come in and run some kind of an offense here for Levy, for this team to have any chance to win some games, to be quite honest.
And you said my key game, I got to go Florida. Like, I wouldn't say that it's not just another game. It's a big deal for Levy to get off the ground in a rebuilding year. You get what I'm saying? Like, because after this, you go at Texas, at Georgia, and then you play a home game against A&M. Now, that could be a rough start if you lose to get to Florida. Like, and have they not played Florida here? You know, I think it's since 2010, I think. Was it Dak Prescott played? I think was Dak? No, I don't think. I can't remember, but this is a key game for Mississippi State, in my opinion. They need to win this game.
Well, it's an early game, and I'm going to be honest with you. They're not going to